Okay, I'm so excited to be here, but let's jump in. I mean, when I was thinking about, and when I think about this conference, when I think about all of you gathered, why we're here is how to share. And when I was thinking about that theme, I thought of surviving and thriving in a borderless digital world because some of the, particularly like the received project that you're going to be hearing more about today, but just in general, the interlibrary loan we do, so much of it now is digital, and that is so easy to share. It can cross borders electronically. It doesn't go through a customs organization. And yes, there are frameworks and firewalls and other things, but that it was exactly what I was thinking about when I started forming this presentation. And it reminded me of the original spirit behind the internet. 30 years ago, 35 years ago, we thought about the power of the internet, digitally connecting the world, seamless communication. And yet, when I thought about that, I thought, I'm hearing, did we live up to that promise? And this was just a Google search when I typed in promise of the internet. The top 3 hits were negative. They were people reassessing, like, have we really met that promise that we had 30 years ago, that the internet was going to seamlessly, it was going to break down barriers, it was going to connect us all. And I think there are lessons that we can learn and things that we can think about as we look at resource sharing in this digital age and how we connect with libraries around the world, and making sure that we don't fall into these pitfalls that have maybe impacted commercial internet. And so today I'm going to be looking at resource sharing globally. My lens or sort of perspective, the data that I can see is based on the network, the OCLC network that I support. So I'm also going to show where that breaks down. But one of the things, as I've started working with libraries, trying to emphasize the power of resource sharing, how do you see resource sharing? So often we're looking at spreadsheets, we're talking to users, we have individual anecdotes or experiences that we know that had an impact. That helped someone. Someone came in and thanked me for that resource that I had to get from far away. But this is a snapshot of a library in the eastern US, and this is the reach of their interlibrary loan just this year. So as I was looking at, we've been trying to think, how can we help libraries visualize the impact of resource sharing? And I feel like this helps me see how broad the reach of resource sharing is for this individual library. And to flip the map, this isn't just the US. Yes, I am based there, and you'll see we have a lot of activity there in some of the things we're going to be looking at. But this is Australia, a library in Sydney. And think of Australia, an island nation that has connectivity. There are libraries within country, but then just how they're dependent upon the world because of their location in the world. And so there's a lot of traffic between Australia and New Zealand, but then there are those great distances. And that's where digital resource sharing is so incredibly powerful, because it isn't limited to physical mailing and shipping and delivery. It can be more instantaneous. But those were individual library examples. What if we look at what does interlibrary loan actually look like? So this is a snapshot from one day last March of the OCLC network. And you can sort of see a shadow on this slide. This started at 9 a.m. Eastern time, so in the eastern side of the US. We have 3 time zones. So daylight is moving across the country. You can start to see libraries waking up. You can see some libraries in Europe who are requesting things. These are the requests going out to libraries saying, I need this thing. And libraries are supplying those items. So the timestamp, though, is the placement of the request. One of the things that satisfies me that I like is we are looking at how we can help libraries do this more efficiently. And by doing, a way we can do that is through automation, making, if the system can figure out what you need, if you have a clear citation, you don't need a staff member to come and sit at a terminal and place that order. So you see some requests being sent from the western side of the US. Those are likely through automation because it's still like 7 o'clock or 7:15 a.m. about now there in this graphic. And it's sped up. We're seeing every, how did this go? Every minute is a second. So you're seeing an hour in 60 seconds on this illustration here. But I feel like we're trying to look at how we can see the power of resource sharing and libraries working together by visualizing it on a map. It sort of looks like air traffic control, and I love how right now especially the eastern half of the US, it looks like a pot boiling on the stove. Everyone is just working away in their library to supply these resources that researchers, students, families, everyone is looking for from the library. So this goes on and on for about 20 minutes. So we're not going to stay on that too long. Let me just answer that and we'll go back to the presentation. But what this brings to mind, though, is a divergence of the loans or the physical items where a library needs a book or a resource, a physical resource, versus when libraries need copies or digital representations of material. And within copyright law generally, Stephen may be able to tell us about technicalities, but generally we're able to supply a copy of an article or a copy of a book chapter to another library to share with their user. So it's limited based on the amount of the work, and there are definitely details around the copyright and ability to share. But it doesn't rely on that shipping and that crossing borders and customs control. I've heard from more and more libraries these days that there's a new, is it VAT or new scrutiny in Europe around things that need to be taxed versus don't, and sometimes library books which shouldn't be taxed are getting hung up in that. So that's why you're going to see that, particularly with the IFLA Document Delivery Committee, we've been really focused on how we can help support libraries in sharing digital material because it is so seamless. And we still want the infrastructure for loaning material when that's required, but we're really trying to bring you ideas of how that can be easier and easier for libraries to share across borders. This is an image of IFLA vouchers. I'm not sure if anyone has used an IFLA voucher to borrow a material. So yes, I see some hands up. And IFLA vouchers are wonderful things, but they are part of the physical world. They are not, they do not support efficiently the digital sharing that the environment, this borderless world, the power of resource sharing in the borderless world that we want to achieve. And so the Document Delivery Committee has thought a lot about it, and it's like one of those immovable objects sometimes to find a solution. 3 years ago at the IFLA conference in Greece, I presented on a project that I did with Peter Bay and Erdegruel, where we tried to test out a blockchain version. So you think of Bitcoin or Ethereum. We were using the Ethereum blockchain, and we did some experiments of how we could pay, libraries might be able to pay each other for sharing material by using we called it Bookcoin. It was something we created to share, but it was complex. It was difficult for us to manage the digital wallets. And I remember telling Peter, I can't go to my library and say to my finance officer and say, I need to buy some cryptocurrency and get a digital wallet. It's just not part of what libraries are doing at this point. Maybe someday that will be possible, but right now we have to think of what is the purpose of payment? And that's where I go back to that division of loans and copies, because there is an expense in shipping physical material cross borders, of insuring it, of making sure it's safe and gets to the library and gets back. And we understand the need for libraries to have cost recovery. But in this digital world, I challenge you in your library to think about what is the purpose of charging another library for the sharing of a digital file. Yes, you need to support the staff to make this digital copy, but you benefit as well because you have access to that world map, those resources, those libraries, and they will return that favor. And we need to think about digital sharing, I think, in a new way. And when we need to use IFLA vouchers, they're there. But if we use them for physical resources, then you can ship the voucher with the physical resource because you're already mailing that. A physical resource shipping for a digital item is very inefficient and very delayed. So what I think about also in resource sharing is the infrastructure to help support libraries in managing all of the ways you have to seek, you are seeking information. So what we looked at in that map of requests flying all over, or the individual library map, that was a resource sharing network. It was the OCLC resource sharing network. Those are the requests on that network. But what your library often has to do is think about, do we purchase documents? Sometimes you don't get it from another library. Maybe you purchase it from an organization, the British Library perhaps, or their document supply center, or their commercial document supply centers. And that goes to purchase on demand sometimes for acquisitions. So maybe a book resource, you actually purchase the physical item. And then a lot of libraries want to manage the pulling of material from their physical collection, patron communication, cross-network connections, and integrating other systems. And that cross-network connection and system integration, I wanted to focus on a little bit because what we have, the limitation of the network that I showed you is it was just when you're in a closed ecosystem of a single resource sharing platform, and there are others we're going to hear about during this conference. But we all need to start thinking about how can we integrate resources through APIs, but even more powerful is our standards. So we think about how the internet grew. It was a standard of HTML, and anyone could create a web page that could be read by a browser. And it didn't matter if you were using the old Netscape browser back in the day, or the early Internet Explorer, or Safari. And those browsers have evolved, and that's all built on standards. And our library systems can communicate based on standards. And this ISO 18626 is the new interlibrary, or fairly new, it's been out of about 4 years now, I believe, how library systems can connect. And I wanted to go back to this map of this library in the US, and I want to zoom in, because what we're missing when we zoom in on the region of the world we're in right now is they don't have strong connections, because the network does not reach the network I have access to. So we look at, where is Italy? And Italy has a strong resource sharing environment and libraries, but the network isn't. I think there's one in northern Italy you can just see on the corner, but in general it's missing. Turkey, we're going to hear a presentation about resource sharing in Turkey. And Saudi Arabia, Oman, Lebanon, Azerbaijan, and Qatar. So we're seeing there are resource sharing that the slides I showed you miss. And I want to be very clear about that, because that's what we're here to solve. That's where the promise of borderless sharing and the reach around the world has not reached its epicenter. We haven't realized that goal yet. And so there's work to be done, and the connections we make this week will help feed that development. And also, as representing IFLA in the capacity of Document Delivery and Resource Sharing Committee, I did want to just touch on how IFLA is helping to support this world of breaking down those barriers. And so I won't go into the detail that you're going to hear in the keynote tomorrow about Received and how it started, or the Hermes project, which you're going to hear about on Friday, and how that is developing to support sharing among libraries. But what the goal, the vision of this is to bridge those connections. So it doesn't matter, I don't need, I was going to say my network or the network I represent that I work for. I don't need that to be connected everywhere if we have resources behind that that bring our networks together. And the project that IFLA is working on and the committee is working on is bringing those networks together. So when the network reaches its limitation, we can then have a mechanism to jump over that divide and reach the library to make the connection to the resource that we need. And that connection comes back to me, because this is like shaking a hand. It is, we support each other, and that's what makes it so powerful.